Hey my friends, it's Graeme Street, and you're here with me on my YouTube channel and cyclocore.com, and you're joining me after a 60-minute high-intensity run. Now, if you've known me for long enough, or you use any of my Cyclo 90 programs, or you're a subscriber to my channel or my podcast, you know that I'm a big advocate of using high-intensity training principles. Whether you are a road cyclist, a mountain biker, a triathlete, a runner, or all of the above, no matter whether you race, do endurance rides, or all of the above, high-intensity training should always be a staple within your training arsenal, within your use of how you ride your bike, how you run, when you push harder, why do we push harder. Today's objective for my 8.5-mile run is to continue off my 12-mile trail run, which I did yesterday. Very difficult trail run. Today's what's called an extension run. You could just as easily do this with riding, and I have many of you doing that with my Cyclo 90 training programs. Today's objective was to stay at or above threshold, basically for the full 60 minutes. 2 loops of, I think, 4.6 miles. Tough terrain, challenging. What is the value of this run or this style of workout? As you know, I'm headed for the VT50, which is an endurance mountain bike ride. About 5 hours, give or take, would be the goal, I guess you could say, which I've never achieved yet. Maybe will this year, maybe I won't, I'm not sure. And a week after that, I have a 26-mile, my first ever trail marathon. These are both endurance events. Why am I using high-intensity training to achieve faster performance? Well, I've got 3 things I want you to consider. 3 very important things regarding high-intensity training and its use. First and foremost, high-intensity training creates a trigger in your body. Whether you know it or not, we still have that fight-or-flight, hunter-gatherer-like mechanism built into our soul, our inner engine. And a lot of times, a lot of us as individuals trying to train for something tend to forget its value of this incredible machine and network of energy in our bodies. High-intensity training allows us to kind of supersede what we think we're capable of doing. We've talked about this before. And that's that superseding of whether it's your threshold, whether it's your muscular endurance, whether it is your full-on Zone 5 or Zone 6 power, creates a trigger in your body and subsequently into your central nervous system or your brain. That trigger creates a response, and it's that response that we're looking for. If you think about it like this, thousands and thousands of years ago, we had to go out into the wild and find our food, whether it was meat, and hunt it, gather it, and then bring it home fresh and ready to eat. That means we had to have some speed. We also had to have the ability to outrun or outmaneuver things that wanted to eat us. Okay? That means that we can move our asses pretty fast. And that's where our ability to do high-intensity training comes in naturally. What our brains are programmed to do is when these triggers happen, when these successions of harder efforts are learned or acquired, your body goes into a state of adaptation. It wants to change because it doesn't want to be slower the next time that this happens. Now, does it? Because thousands of years ago, that would mean that what? You're dead. Seriously, think about it. So your body wants to get faster, it wants to perform faster. However, our modern techniques of training have taught it to be slower, more economical, more efficient. And I've promoted these things to you as well. Economy as you run or as you ride is imperative. However, there are times where we want to be not so efficient. We want to supersede our speed. We want to supersede our threshold. We want to supersede our VO2 max, or get close to our VO2 max, or push it a little bit, nudge it, to create that trigger. How often should this trigger be happening? How often should you be using high-intensity training? Well, if you use my Cyclo 90 programs, I know many of you are thinking about starting. With the base program, we're using about 2 high-intensity training sessions per week. Only 2. It's all that I need. I will then balance that with moderate workouts, technique workouts, endurance workouts, auxiliary workouts, recovery workouts. We can't use high intensity every workout, okay? Simply your body's not designed that way. It needs to get hit, learn, adapt, get stronger, and then hit again. But we need a timetable to get that done. So if you're trying to do high intensity training every single workout, it's not going to work. Let me guide you through on getting the high intensity done in an appropriate amount of time. Now, second thing that high intensity training does that's incredible is it creates a stimulus called EPOC. You ever heard of EPOC before? Exercise post-oxygen consumption. Basically, how much oxygen or how much elevated oxygen intake we see from a respiration standpoint after the HIIT session is done. Typically, the higher the intensity, the higher the EPOC. The higher the rate of oxygen consumption by your body because of the high intensity trigger. What's the value to you? Whether you know it or not, I mean, oxygen is the secret. It's the secret weapon here. If your body can get more of it, and it can utilize more of it, which is really the secret ingredient. It's one thing to pump in more oxygen into your body. It's another thing to teach your body how to use more of it, to exchange it at the cellular level, to exchange bad CO2 or basically expired oxygen out of your body and replace it with good, healthy oxygen ready to use for energy or repair. It's the repair that we want from this EPOC. So, in an essence, think about this. The harder you push, the greater your potential for recovery. Now that doesn't make sense. We've always been taught that if you push yourself harder and you do a harder workout, that you're going to need more rest, more time between. And in general, depending on what the actual endeavor is, that's true. However, if you have a balanced approach where you're using high-intensity training, moderate technique work, endurance work, auxiliary work, recovery work, and you're balancing that over a timetable, over a stretch of time, you can now begin to reap the benefits of more and more EPOC. This is why many of you that have moved into the Cycle 90 in-season protocol have much more use, or you'll see many more high-intensity sessions that above which we had for the Cycle 90 base. There's a reason for that. Because the harder I push you into that state of EPOC, the harder I create those triggers, the more often I create them, ironically, the faster you should recover between sessions. And really, in essence here, the faster you recover between sessions is more indicative of how well your training is working than how fast you're performing during the workout. So for instance, today's run, 8.5 miles. Goal pace, 7 minutes or below per mile. I achieved 6:55. I ran 2 splits of 4.6 miles, give or take, or 4.3 miles. And the second split was faster than the first. Pushing myself beyond my threshold, pushing myself beyond my pace for the last 2 or 3 minutes to achieve that final punch and stimulus that I'm looking for. Now, hypothetically, that should cause me to be more fatigued for my next workout. But here's the thing. The more fit I get you with these techniques, the faster, or let's put it this way, the shorter the distance of recovery you should have between harder and harder workouts. The real secret with getting stronger and more fit isn't just how hard you work out within the workout, but how quickly you can recover from that stimulus and repeat it again. If you can repeat more of those key sessions or hyper-stimulus workouts or high-intensity training workouts, the more fit you're going to get. Now the last thing, and this is important, is to start thinking of the use of HIIT training as basically like a fountain of youth. Many of my customers, you that may be watching, are over the age of 40. And let me tell you, this is when the use of HIIT training, high-intensity training, becomes the most valuable. And let me tell you why. Remember I told you about that trigger, or that set of triggers from high-intensity training? There's a couple ways that it gets triggered. One is by ventilation. As ventilation goes up, or it hits a maximum, that ventilation, that contraction of your diaphragm, your serratus anterior here, these are the muscles between your rib cage, and the chest plate itself. Whether you know it or not, these are actually hardwired electrically to your brain. When they get to a state like this, boom, 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 along with your heart, boom, 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 that creates a trigger. That trigger goes right to your pineal gland. And that pineal gland says, hey, you know what? We just did something extraordinary, hard, intense. That mountain lion almost caught us. We almost caught that deer, but we didn't have enough speed. I'm going to bump up something to help us do that quicker. What does it like to bump up? Growth hormone, and testosterone. And yes, ladies, this pertains to you just as much as it does to the guys. Testosterone and growth hormone are two things that help your body basically stop the aging process. In fact, really what aging really is, technically, is the reduction of growth hormone and testosterone in the human body. Those reductions come because of either A, inactivity, which is majority of our population, but for someone like us, an everyday cyclist or runner, it's more about not superseding our boundaries. Everything becomes this kind of zone 2, zone 3 lockdown. Well, I'm an endurance athlete. I'm looking for 5 hours, 6 hours, so I don't need high intensity. Remember the triggers. If we stimulate the triggers and we release more growth hormone, more testosterone, what happens? Recovery rate begins to go up. Muscle mass begins to go up. Body fat begins to go down. Your metabolism, your thyroid begins to become more active. It's this activity that creates that youthfulness. That, like, man, I feel younger. I feel fresher. Instead of 2 days between those workouts to recover, I'm now doing it in 1 day. And I could actually probably whittle that down to half a day. The trick here is to know when to apply the pressure, when to apply the intensity, and when not to. In general, what a lot of us will tend to do is apply too much intensity for too long, session after session after session. Or the polar opposite, we're so afraid of intensity that we never really supersede ourselves at all. And we kind of get trapped in this box. And this is probably the majority of you as everyday cyclists, is getting trapped in that box where you want to get faster, you want to improve, because but your fear of going beyond your limits hinders you or hinders your body from creating those triggers. You never actually get those balls in motion. And these things are going to help you do that. Now, a suggestion for you. I've got a lot of people asking me a lot of questions lately, a lot of questions. You've watched how I've dropped 25 pounds of body weight, how my speed on both the bike and my running, especially my running, has dramatically escalated in such a short amount of time. It's because of the same things I'm teaching you right now and have always taught you since day one. Those of you that are asking about where do I begin with this, I believe in you, Graeme. I believe in what you're talking about. It makes sense to me. I feel that I've boxed in. I want to break that box apart. Where do I begin with your programs? Everyone that's looking at me right now, if you haven't used anything of mine yet, please begin with the Cyclo 90 base protocol. No matter whether you're fat, you're thin, you're tall, you're short, you're a guy, you're a girl. I don't care if you're looking to race. I don't care if you're looking to do centuries. I don't care if it's mountain biking, road cycling. It doesn't matter. Cyclo 90 base is going to lay the foundation of everything we've just talked about and more. High intensity training, cycling specific core and functional training, moderate intensity training, endurance training, all wrapped into a 90-day protocol, okay? Once that's complete, then you can move on to my Cyclo 90 specific in-season protocols for both road cycling or mountain biking. Again, it comes together as a package where I begin to up the ante on these techniques. If you're a triathlete, I have the Triathlon 4P training system, okay? This is a full soup to nuts, beginning to end, to sprints, Olympics, halves, fulls, full periodization, including high-intensity training techniques. And yes, if you're looking for half and full Ironmans, absolutely high-intensity training should be an asset within your arsenal. Either case, Cyclo 90 base for you as cyclists to begin with, and if you're a triathlete, you might want to consider the use of the TriPlan 4P system. In either case, start thinking about your training, especially your high-intensity days, specific days that are designed to push you beyond that boundary, to create that trigger. When those triggers are created, and then you smooth that out with the other types of workouts, that's when the real magic's going to happen. I hope these tips are helpful, my friend. No beer today. I've got a group ride later on tonight. That's after my 8.5-mile ride, so I got to do a little bit of recovery here. This is seltzer water. I'll have my Oktoberfest that I just kegged 2 days ago tonight after dinner. Until we speak again, rather the smell on your face. I'll talk to you soon.